Thank you for returning with us for the second half of the first class on the topic Brahmapada, how Brahman disports itself. And what we probably mean by that is even in the universe, that is the physical worlds, because we know in India the physical world is just one of 7 levels of existence. The other 6 go back inside of you. And so does God and heavens, and everything is not backwards in time like science may be limited to, or upwards in space like an immature heavenly seeker might think about looking up or something. My ancestors are somewhere up there in the planets. It's all back inside of you, and it's there because it's in the mind, and the mind has given birth to all these worlds. The mind is the great hub of everything in the realms of, if you want to use the word creation. Creation, preservation, destruction. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, there was always a couple devotees that would come up and explain everything Om as creation, preservation, and destruction, and he would correct them, because there is no real birth and no real death for the soul or for Brahman. Even when it disports itself, it'll take a body and 5 senses, like the Gita says, and sport with them and then leave them, like bees going to different flowers and giving up the flowers and just coming back with the honey. Nobody sees that happens, but that's the way Shakti and Brahman both see it, as was shown in our first class. I might bring that chart back again next week to just orient us again to the idea of Brahmapada. How that Brahman can never be a thing, but it can become a thing. That is, it can associate with it, but it never identifies with it. And when it becomes a thing, it assumes it and then gives it up. Attaches and detaches at will. That's how things shine, and have a shine of their own. Basically, philosophically, you'd want to probably explain that in terms of prana. Like, man does not live by bread alone. What did Jesus mean by that? Well, Vedanta would go into an explanation about life force and how it animates everything. But God's not going to come there and make you move your arms and legs and everything. What a drag for God to take on a form and have to do that. So it has mechanisms through which it disports, and it takes them on and gives them up. It shines a lightning bolt through the seers, but that lightning bolt doesn't show up very well in the shutter of the ordinary human being, which is the whole point of our first half of this class. So then the seers, who are these clear panes of glass, their Atman is all polished, the mirror of their mind's been all polished clean, and they're seeing that emanation of Brahman as the light and everything, whether it be prana or psychic prana or the Mahat, the cosmic mind, or the word Om. They have a clear look at all of those things. And when they take this clear look, as I say, if they have some sort of compassion for beings who are not seeing the way they do, then they'll come down to a certain point and be very careful of the gravity there. It's sort of like, oh, you're in a satellite station, or you're in a rocket ship of some kind, and you get just that close to the Earth, but then you feel gravity start to kick in and pulling you towards certain death. So you keep just above the layer of gravity and float there freely. Seers might be described like that, great souls who come down to a certain stations where they can look out upon the worlds of name and form without getting pulled down into them. And I think I used that a few weeks ago when I said I had to rescue people out of the ocean on the north shore of Oahu where I lived, and waves were ferocious there when they got big. And even sailors would get dragged out and almost drown. And if you go out to try and help them, because you can navigate these big waves because you're doing it every day, you know what you're experienced and how to stay alive out there and survive. And you're actually not even panicking or fearing it. It's actually an exhilarating experience for you, but it becomes fearful matter for people who don't know how to live in that ocean. So you have to swim up to them and say, I'm going to save you now. And they're trying to grasp at you and pull you down with them. And you have to say, not till you calm down. I'm not coming near you, because I'm not going under with you in these waves, with you with a death grasp on me. So calm down, and then take a breath. It'll all be over in 10 seconds. And you get them on a wave, crashing. They'll have to end up on shore, thankful for their lives. So that's, again, a kind of metaphor for being seers who come to a certain station above the three worlds, you might say, and just look at what's going on there, because they have a sensitivity about suffering, and they want people to, from age to age, have a chance to transcend Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, or heaven, earth, hell, whatever realms they're caught in. So where is the station that they occupy for this? And that's the antakarna, that's the mind. So it's the most important thing to know about. And this chart, before I go to the 4 stages of your consciousness, that is a classic non-dual chart based on Gaudapada's wonderful teachings on 4 states of consciousness. I wanted to show you the mind-only school again, which is a fairly new chart where I envisioned a patch of pumpkins, like all the cosmic principles are all pumpkins, and we're all kind of pumpkin heads too. And it's not just a Halloween chart, although it's not meant to scare you, but it can inform you of deeper things. If you're taking it from the hub of the mind on down, remember there are things that are beyond the mind. When you first came to Hinduism or Vedanta or yoga, when you were young, one of the early teachings you got, which is admittedly at a very novice type of level, novitiate type of level, is I'm not the body. So they were running that teaching by you all the time. I'm not the body, I'm not the body. But you know, your main focus at that time was food, how to eat organic food or better food or vegetarian and all that. So there was a lot of dichotomy going on there, because you were all acting as if you were the body. They were telling you you're not the body. So once you got that digested, hopefully, as you digested your better food around it, then the next thing you begin to hear about is you're not the mind either. And of course we had to learn the distinction between the brain and the mind at some point. That occurred to some of us. And then when we started thinking of the mind, we were thinking too high. We thought about cosmic mind. The mind of God was a big saying back there in the 60s and 70s when I was learning this Dharma, and just before I met my teacher, Swami Sheshananda. Peace and bliss be upon him. So you can jump too high in that. So you know, you're either down there at the level of the brain, or you're trying to think high and impress your friends by talking about the cosmic mind of God. But in between was the antakarna itself, the fourfold mind, which is the inner organ, which at the time you didn't have any idea that it produced all the worlds. Because science had gotten hold of you, and you had learned about evolution, or the 7-day creation theory had gotten into your mind, and it didn't have anything, didn't explain how beings got to heaven and how they got pulled back to earth. A lot of the dynamics of a good, well-working, solid cosmology were gone in the West. Maybe they were never there. So you learned about the antakarna, and the meaning of the word was the inner, the antaha, inner cause, karana, as I mentioned in the first half. So when they use that in a very broad sense of the term, it's the cause of everything below it. So God is not the cause. The Word is not directly the cause there. The angels, the celestials, Indra, not directly the cause. It's the mind that's the cause. Because every one of these beings has a mind. And like I said before the break, the mind of the Mahad, or the mind of the Trinity, tends to go where the atmosphere is the rarest. Yes, up, or what we mean by up is inward again. But everything from the mind downward has a tendency to fall like rain. So now you see why Sri Ramakrishna gave us that teaching. The mind, ordinary mind, is like rainwater. It falls and it seeks the lowest place to settle. If you've watched rain during a heavy deluge, and you see that, oh, there it stopped. Oh no, it's rolling into the hoof print of a cow or something. You see, it wants to go even lower. So that's the nature of the mind. So that's this antahakarana, and if you want to help living beings get out of sankalpa, vikalpa, I wish I probably should have put the chart we had at the first half across here so we could refer back to it, but you remember the phases of the moon illustration and how the antakarana was bordering on and brooking on akashas, maya, lokas, sankalpa. These are important words. That is how the worlds of name and form and time and space get projected. Not created, because you can't create something out of nothing. You have to project it out of something. So the something you're projecting it out of it are your thoughts. So you're the father of your own deeds. You're the father of your own worlds in which those deeds are also committed. And nobody's going to take any responsibility for you for that, unless you can contact Ishwara and make a plea to him or her to come and help me. Pahimam, save me. Songs written about that. Prayers are written for that. Scriptures are written about people who did that. So you're on your own. If you fall mind and lower, see, the worlds of rebirth, the wheel of samsara, the puzzle of maya, however way you want to put it, and you must avail yourself of something that will help you when you go there. See. Fools rush in where wise men fear to tread. It's a beautiful saying in English. So fools mean those who rush to this world that you're living in right now, take on a body that you're identifying with now, use the senses for enjoyment that you're enjoying right now, and have this mind or this brain, as far as you're concerned right now, that thinks or maybe doesn't think very well or very often. If you take on the Dharma, you're actually telling the brain, let's learn what the mind knows. And when you find the mind, you're actually telling the mind, let's get beyond you, okay? And it says, how do we do that? Well, there's an ego, that's in charge of you. That's part of the antakarana. Fourfold mind, the ego, is riding the chariot of your intellect, drawn by the horses of thought, see. And all with this two-wheeled chariot is dualism. You see, it's being pulled out into the worlds of name and form via that great word that we looked at before the break called sankalpa, mental projection. So enough of a little preamble about that to show you, in accord with the chart we looked at where Holy Mother said, flash of lightning appears in the window pane, but it does not appear in the shutters. And everything we went through there, let's look at why India thinks about the mind-only perspective. That's that school in India that will explain these subtleties to the aspirant or the truth seeker, so that confusions can be gotten over and you can rely upon what's real and not get confused by what's unreal. Vedanta wants that. Well, just at the very image here, you can see this field of pumpkins, and back behind it are more. So if you go deep into, as deep as you possibly can, where it's still orange there, you see the gods and goddesses. You might say, out of the gods and goddesses and their realms inside, realms overseen by, say, Indra, the Lord of gods, in the Indian pantheon. Then you'll see all of these gods and goddesses and their dominions over hundreds of different worlds. Just like you have different mayors and different senators and for states and countries, presidents for different countries here in this world, and there are multiple. The same way back in these worlds where these gods are keeping very refined, subtle bodies, they have a desire to lord over these worlds with billions of beings in them. This is all a kind of deep, beautiful, heavenly dream world. You can visit it if you want in your dreams tonight. If you meditate and purify the mind and open this eye, you can see how deep consciousness goes. Remember, what is that? Brahman disporting. That's how we're calling it in this particular class. In another particular series of class, we could call it, that's all Maya, look out for it, don't go there. Transcend it, you see. I'm a non-dualist, let's do that. But here we're taking a kind of a combination of the best of Vedanta teachings with Tantra and Yoga, and Samkhya, of course, and we're looking at it from the standpoint of the kingdoms of heaven within, probably the best way to explain it to people, or my Father's mansion has many chambers. So my Father's mansion is the great mind of God, and inside of that there's all these worlds which are different chambers, and beings that live in those chambers, and they move about and go from different chamber to different chamber, and sometimes they leave those chambers and fall lower into physical worlds with physical homes and physical rooms in them, the kind of which you're all restricted to right now because of the virus. Make yourself at home, they say, right? So nowhere is it more meaningful than right now. But this whole mind is your home in that sense. At last Saturday's, what was it, yesterday, satsang, I was saying all of you are living in your mind right now, and you could hear a pin drop, you see. Pin drop, a deafening silence, you see. It's not a thought that occurs to many people, but if you follow the tradition, you'll see that it's true, that the mind produced everything, all the way down to the 5 elements of air, earth, fire, water, and ether. It deftly put them together, and it does that when you are in your waking state, and it deftly takes them apart when you go into deep sleep. They're gone, they're gone, they're gone. The Buddhists call that phenomena arising all the time, but nothing happening. Like Shakti's view, that young woman looking at the whole thing. She's got the best view. She's seeing the lightning bolt, she's seeing the window pane, she's seeing the shutters, she's seeing all the things that happen there, and she knows how it happens all the way down to the, as the scriptures say, to every blade of grass growing and dying every day. She's in everything as the thing, see, unique. So the gods and goddesses would be probably, in one sense, the deepest thing you could go to until you reached a seedless state. See those words back there? Nirvikalpa. That's Vedanta's state for, as I said in the first half, nirvi, made extinct, kalpa, time. Well, if there's no time, then there's no worlds and no forms, because there's no worlds. So basically, it's all been made extinct. You're back in your own pure nature, and this is why I say India is so important to consider or to study, because they have, if you want to call it that, a philosophy around non-duality. The rest of the world doesn't. The rest of the world and all of the religions in this world have a few statements about non-duality. India has its main philosophy about Advaita Vedanta and how that is the foundation of everything. Without knowing that, how could you say it disports? Or, oh, I saw it there for a second. See, I got a non-dual realization. Brahman just came and visited me and went away, probably through his Shakti, in my dream. So, faster than the fastest, higher than the highest, slower than the slowest, and lower than the lowest. It's everywhere at all times, in one eternal moment. Beings trying to meditate, trying to attain that one eternal moment where everything falls away. And that's a big bolt of lightning in the window pane of their pure mind. So in this chart, for our purposes right now, out of the goddesses would come the celestials. We're talking really about the mind, so I didn't go to places in this chart like the Word or Ishvara or Avatar. I'm not even really Mahat, because I say Mahat has a tendency to roll its eyes up whenever it thinks of Brahman. See, do I have to be a mind anymore? You know, can't I just join you? at the highest level and dissolve. No, you've got another, 15,000 billion years of cycles of evolution to go on before you can join me. It's not that long. Go ahead, indulge in it, enjoy. But keep your mind on me. So Mahat wants to always go up, but for the Antakarna, it's saying, look at those lower worlds, I wonder what they're like. And the gravity gets very attracting and difficult to resist. So you get pulled down to them. Even wise beings, they say, can get pulled down, forget their jnanam, and get born again in the worlds of name and form, and make believe like they have to get it all back. This is the big joke, and if you realize this is one of the things that makes you want to steer clear of these worlds, because you know everything when you get to them. Now you have to pretend like you have to learn it again. You have to go through the motions when all knowledge lies within you, when the kingdoms of heaven are already within you, when the Lord is never separate from you. These are hard and fast rules, not just in Indian religion, but in other religions too. But we somehow forget them or don't believe them anymore. It's a very painful phenomena and a very harsh risk you take when you take on the realms of name and form physically. Even heavenly, I'd say, because the goddesses and gods are in heaven, higher heaven. The celestials are in a lower heaven. And your ancestors, lower heaven still. So these are all pumpkins, you see, that get further and further recede back into the consciousness that is seedless. So Nirvikalpa is one way of saying that. Zen has a beautiful way, after 54 generations, that it finally made its way from India to Japan as pretty much Indian Buddhism, called Satori. There, your Busho is the thing. Busho means your Atman, really. It's your Buddha nature. So they came up with a Japanese word for it. And Zen itself is that very non-dualistically flavored religion that's there in the Near East for us now. And people that we know of in the 60s and 70s that were popularized by being Zen practitioners have gone to it and influenced people to consider it. On the other side over here you have yoga's way of saying seedless state, asampragyata. Sampragyata would mean very high experiences that have a cause to them still. You might say the smaller lightning that comes off that one main bolt of lightning, if you remember that image. It gives you, if you have the presence of Brahman so close to you, then you're having experiences from that aren't as intense as that. Because if you have the intense experience, you go seedless, you go formless, you go nameless, you go actually beyond consciousness and beyond the great mind. There's no way to explain that to people. The closest way you can explain it is their deep sleep state. We'll look at that hopefully this week, today. So I'm saying that in the terms of those four words that are back there, Satori being one of them, and then of course over here Nirvana, which is a classic Buddhist way, made extinct. Those words that start with that root, Sanskrit syllable, nir, pretty much blown out like a candle. Everything snuffed, you see. And then just this state of indescribable homogeneity. If you say oneness, then somebody will come along and say, you mean not two-ness. But for homogeneity, it's just without parts, indivisible. And where the salt doll got in the ocean and to try and measure the depths, but dissolved there when it got in. That's Sri Ramakrishna's experience of Nirvikalpa when he had it. So you can only speak of it with very high philosophical words or with these metaphors that somehow do it justice. Salt doll. So that's Brahman disporting, right? You're really Brahman. You're made of Brahman. You're made of consciousness. But you've overlaid it with these five sheaths in Vedanta, you see, or with if you're not careful on earth, a whole bunch of other evolutes like lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy. Going to have to like work your way through all of those. And then you come to ignorance before you can even get to lower knowledge. Then you part that and you get to higher knowledge. Finally I can make some sense out of all of this and see where I came from and where I want to go. It's called involution. If you've come as far out as you can go, you can't get any lower. You can't get any further out, then what do you find? It's all empty. That's what the atomic particle is telling you. Everything here is empty. You came out here thinking to find something and you found nothing. And the nothingness, if you studied it long enough, was blissful. It freed you of everything that you had taken to be real, which wasn't real, when you came to it. But you're going to have to sit a while and look at that emptiness, see? Like the scientist has been for far too long, in my opinion, to finally figure out what the Buddhists figure out centuries ago. It's all empty. It's non-fulfilling. It doesn't have any substance, but it has an essence. So the Buddhists went so far and so deep as to say insubstantial, unfulfilling. Give it up. It's nivritti. It's to be renounced. Oh, but wait. Once I looked at it long enough as being empty, the witness came forward. See, who was it that was calling it empty? See, and all of a sudden, you're the witness. See? It's like Divine Mother opened a door to you, so you could see it as it truly is. That is, you give it its true identity as Brahman, sporting. Couldn't say that before because it was a misfiance. You see, it was an insult against a transgression of the laws of non-duality. But you can't say anything else but that when you finally see it. You know, it's like the Advaita sings about it. Nishkama kama iha nama katam vadami Nisanga sanga iha nama katam vadami Nisara sara rahitam cha katam vadami Gyanamritam samarasam Gaganopamoham Advaita rupa akilam Hikatam vadami Dvaita swarupam mahikim Hikatam vadami Nityam twanityam akilam Hikatam vadami Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. This is the 40 verses in the Advaita Gita. We call it like the sky stotram. He uses that metaphor. And in these verses he sings beautifully. How can it be said that Brahman has desires or has none? It is outright persiflage to call that attached or unattached. Similarly, in the end, it is futile reasoning to label it real or unreal. I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. Is it the causeless hub of all dualities? Is it non-dual only? Is it of the nature of eternity? And can the term non-eternal explain it? I only know about Brahman that I am that. I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. and on in 40 verses in this beautiful non-dual stotram, which is kind of a very rare kind. He goes on explaining this as far as words can tell about Brahman. And so you probably should think that the Advaita is someone who gave up sporting, got through the Leela, saw everything even in heaven as being ho-hum, and went on to the highest level of consciousness, merged himself as Brahman, and Mother brought him back, to disport and fill in every little gap in his thinking consciousness about how Brahman is all and in everything, and became this consummate master of self-realization. The Advaita. So some of this about these 4 assignments up here: Asampragyata Samadhi, Sila Samadhi in Yoga, Satori in Zen, Nirvana in Buddhism, and Nirvikalpa Samadhi in Vedanta. That's beyond the seeds that the gods and goddesses, celestials and ancestors have come out of. Now, to flesh it out, to see how Brahman can disport, probably with a more limited light than it does in these higher worlds, it comes all the way down, as it were, in the form of the senses and prana, or vital force. So the next appearance it could make on its way into the worlds of name and form would be that thing which the ancestors are so attached to, prana. Because prana gives them their children. Prana gives them their food. And somewhere in the ancestors they know this. So prominent prana, not Brahman, has become their preoccupation. They want the worlds of name and form and time and space from the 3 lower chakras down. That's their territory. This is why Lord Buddha came about 550 years before Jesus Christ and tried to warn India about getting beyond the level of the ancestors. Pitris. Interesting word, Pitri. So it's kind of like a petri dish in Western science. The Pitris got their own little dish there in their own world, where they are busy incubating and building themselves, fomenting, as Vivekananda called it. So he got these ancestors using this prana to get where? Into the fetus, with the parents, in a family, and enjoy life in the 3 lower worlds. So desire-based life with enjoyment, using the prana to get there, and manning the senses. You might say it's all one kind of package that they're looking at. If they find out all of a sudden that heaven's not going to host them anymore, and their karma, their hot air balloon has sprung a leak, and falling back into the world, the gross physical world. There you see it next, the physical body or outer shell. And I put that outer shell in parentheses as an on-purpose joke, because the pumpkin has a nice outer shell. And it can turn into a jack-o'-lantern very easily, by the way, to enforce the horrors of Halloween on you. It's kind of a cosmic Halloween that happens here all the time, like this pandemic that we're going through right now. Except you can't see that jack-o'-lantern. It's a little tiny critter inside. You can't even see it coming. Put your mask back on. So, physical body, the outer shell, is right there in the middle of that big fat pumpkin. And then the 5 elements, or what's called primal matter. Because if you look back up to prana, that's really a kind of subtle matter that's there. It's also insentient, but it has a lot more light of Brahman that it uses to disport. It can make use of that and flow through the nadis from the 3 worlds, Bhur, Bhuva, Swahar, or if you want to call them Manipura, Swadhisthana, and Muladhara chakras, and have more of that life of the mind and its desires fulfilled. My teacher used to give a class maybe once a year, called it Satiation Never Comes, as he saw the Westerners sitting in his ashram there, Vedanta Society, they call it, Vedanta Center, and learning the Vedanta, but still following on with the old habits of Western life, and wondering about them, how they were maturing in their mind, if they were taking the Vedanta Dharma teachings literally and seriously to enlighten these inner chambers, bring about more intelligence. So that talk he gave, Satiation Never Comes, was directed at them, because he's talking about not just here on earth you can go and do these things and not get satisfied, because a lot of the people that came to him had probably already learned that. They were older. Vedanta societies had a lot of older people in them and less of young people, which is still kind of a problem in America. So he would be kind of warning them not only about, as on heaven here on earth, but this is as on earth also in heaven. So if you're thinking about joining your ancestors, you've got to realize that satiation never comes, that this is the loop that never gets satiated, that you're constantly for the same things again and again. It's just a matter of higher heaven and get a better human birth, because that is a way in which you can evolve more maturely, more successfully, to finally reach the Lord and Mother, Him herself, in the heart chakra, we would call. Now if you see this pumpkin off to the left here, because this is also a chart, you'll see that I put an inlay there, an inset, of cutting one of those pumpkins open and seeing the seeds in it. So there you see the title, Internal Mind, or the Subtle Body, accompanying this inset. And here's what the mind projects. So if you come down to the human mind, the mind-only schools, and why the gravity at the level of Antakarna is so heavy and so weighty to pull you down again and again, hard to get beyond it, then you'll see why. There you see the mind projects what? It projects nature itself. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, people come to this earth and they get attracted to the garden, but nobody goes looking for the gardener. So nature attracts them and hypnotizes them. And if it doesn't do it via its beauty, it does it via its resources. Some beings come here for the beauty, artists, so forth, see, bird lovers, foresters, farmers. Now let's see the beauty in all this. Others come here just to use these resources, get money, and dominate. And all various expressions thereof. So you see, if the mind itself is producing nature from Prakriti, if you go back to our first chart, from Prakriti on down, manifested Prakriti has got a big pull on people and the prana that's running through it. So if you want to know what the sandbags are in your particular hot air balloon and why you can't get beyond worship of the ancestors, which you should be doing in order to get beyond them, then that's your problem. You've got to cut out some of these sandbags, figure out what they are, lift off, and go beyond the celestial regions. That's a big, important teaching right there for what's inside the pumpkin as one of its seeds. The mind projects nature itself. Now the ideas for nature, they're in the Mahat, I should say that, as seeds. The ideas for nature are there in God's mind. But God per se will use them to create much better worlds through its Shakti. But as consciousness dumbs down and begins to fall into the weighty levels of the Antakarna on down, the mind will take over, using the ego to use these seeds in a different way. Still will project beautiful worlds, won't they? Say, oh, I think I'll borrow some of that beauty from the seeds of the Mahat, but I'll go down there with a totally different intention than the Mahat has for it. And I already said that just now. To enjoy the beauty, or to desire the resources, or to dominate over lower beings. It projects the worlds then too, mind. Yes, little old you in a cahoots with 7 or 800 billion people decided to come to this world, and so with your thoughts you created it. That is, projected it. If you can get beyond these 7 billion people and beyond the collective mind, then you can become one with yourself again. You can see you have to go against the grain. Like pleasure crafts are all going downstream, the Abhidhut said. But I wanted to go upstream, so I took a kayak and I took the effort and sweat and perspiration and it took to go upstream because I wanted to see where the source of the river was. Kings and queens and ancestors are all floating down the river enjoying their foods with no effort and doing things that created karma for them. But I took the kayak and went up to the source. So he can sing a song like the Gyanamritam Stotram there because he's gone to the source and seen it. Just like Mahashakti was looking at lightning bolt, windows, and shutters and seeing the whole thing as clear as a bell. Which is what we should be doing every breath of our life. Seeing it all as clear as a bell. Not taking any wooden nickels or masquerades or imposters. You should be the great pretender, but never the great imposter, as Lord Vashishta says in the scripture Yoga Vashishta. What else is there? Well, nature, worlds, bodies, you see, and races, whole races of bodies, cultures. On the other side, objects, gods, and gods. So Vivekananda would say something like that. These are all concepts in the human mind. And we have to try and get over these concepts. That is, children, ancestors, gods, even God is a concept. It's only a word here. Why do you think people go after nature and in the garden and not the gardener? They're attracted outward, hypnotized outward, and on a wheel that's moving up sometimes and down the rest of the time. They're getting confused with which direction they actually are going in life or in a series of lifetimes, till such an age comes when they don't even believe in many lifetimes. One and done. That's the expression now, one and done. You can't put Maya to the mat with one punch. You've got to come at it with a series of punches, and nowadays kicks and submissions. You've got to know how to wrestle, how to box, how to do jiu-jitsu. This is one and done is an expression from the MMA world. So one and done is not going to do it in this fight against delusion. Delusion first in your mind and individual minds, and illusion in the world of Maya. Delusion and illusion both have to be overcome. Across the bottom of this cut open pumpkin I put Ekarnava, the ocean of ethereal matter. So these akashas are floating. These lotuses are floating in. These akashas are floating on. These lokas are floating on top of Ekarnava, an ocean of ethereal existence. Vishnu himself goes to sleep on that, on a Ananta, the 1,000-headed snake, see, which covers him, so that he can just sleep peacefully and then wake up again and project the worlds of name and form and time and space, using the Mahat to do it. When I said that gods and goddesses both and objects were all to be overcome in the mind, here's that beautiful quote from Vivekananda that I just referred to. And this is what we are trying to realize from time without beginning in the objective. And in the attempt, our minds are throwing up such queer creatures of our fancy as man, woman, child, body, brain, earth, sun, moon, stars, the world, love, hate, property, wealth, etc. Also ghosts, devils, angels, and gods, God, etc. Everything the great man could think about, he put in the heading human sankalpa, throwing up creatures of our fancy, queer creatures of our fancy, and calling them everything but what they truly are. You'd be better off to call them either unreal and give them up, or you'd probably say they're an expression of Brahman and I should follow them to the source. If you can take the sword and cut them away, the path of discrimination, good for you if you have that kind of power and ability. If not, then you're going to have to proceed stage by stage and meditate upon these inwardly until you reach beyond your ancestors, beyond the celestials, beyond the gods and goddesses, and come to know what, well, let's put it this way, come to know that actually there does exist a seedless state, which you knew nothing about as you were doing the involution process. Here's another quote at top, and we'll finish this chart up. The seers of India have realized that everything in form proceeds from the mind. And this is why they have revealed the singular way leading to its dissolution. Sri Ramakrishna has compared the mind's propensity for production to rice seed, that's called paddy, strewn across the ground before the rainy season sets in. A riot of growth is the result. But if these seeds are exposed to fire prior to the exposure to soil, their power of germination is destroyed. This fire is the practice of yoga, which renders the mind's proclivity for desire-based expression nil and void, opening the gate to samadhi. There are many types of seated samadhis, knowledge, peace, bliss, etc., but there is only one kind of unseated samadhi. So this chart, we can culminate it with that. Back there in the seedless state is the foundation out of which everything sprung. That might as well be called, for our intents and purposes today, the disporting of Brahman. All out of the seedless state to very, very fine causal seeds, to subtle seeds, to gross seeds. Why do you think there's so many of them in a pumpkin or a watermelon? What lesson is nature trying to teach you? Many waves on an ocean, many clouds in a sky, many seeds in a fruit. It's saying all the time to you, the ultimate message of Brahman is disporting. Brahman's in everything. Brahman has become everything. Brahman has become the 24 cosmic principles. So by these acts of sadhana, or self-effort, discipline, purify the mind so we can see it that way, everything can change, presto changeo, you see, instantly, if you change the mind that's perceiving the thing. Otherwise, it's holding all these things against you. And as we said last week, you're behind the 8 ball. You can't win the game of pool from behind the 8 ball. Now, in the time remaining, which is about, say, 20 minutes or so, we could at least make an attempt at giving the overall look from the Advaitic standpoint of what it means when we say Brahmapada. If you said that to Gaudapada, he'd say, okay, well, it makes me think of Brahman and its 4 states of consciousness based upon what? The word. All 12 slokas of the Mandukya Upanishad, count them, only 12, all express the truth of the word. The word is AUM, and of course the Shvara, which in the Sanskrit original is that one-eyed smile, I like to call it, next to it, unsupported by anything else, independent. So basically that's AUM and transcendent, and the way that that's looked at and described by these great souls is very personal. We mean this when we say Brahman is disporting and everything through the word, in this case, that these letters are your very conditions of consciousness. And we'll look at that next week, because you have 3 states, 7 limbs, and 19 mouths in which to experience them, say the Upanishads. There's Gaudapada right there. So these two could be side by side, and if we don't finish this week, we will put them side by side to start off the second class next week. But to give you the overall problem, it's of course not understanding that God is our very self. And that's of course not going to be accepted or looked kindly upon by most dualistic religions, certainly not by fundamentalist views. But the way we mean that in India is that there can be no separating the soul from God, the Jivatman from the Paramatman, that one is the reflection of the other. You could put it kindly that way. That the light of God is in everything and in everyone. If it's in the sun, then which is an insentient mass of fire, it should also be in the human body. Sri Ramakrishna used to say this very much. He said, "You offering flowers in front of the deities in the temple, why shouldn't you do that to the living God, standing on 2 legs outside the temple?" Everywhere there's a puja going on. Look at that tree over there. It's showering flowers all over its own roots. See? Why cry tears of sorrow on your own divine feet? That's one of the verses of this song, the Advaita. Why drop tears of sorrow on your own divine feet? You are pure existence, pure knowledge, pure bliss, like the sky, indivisible like space. He says that over and over again after every 40 verse, all the 40 verses. So he doesn't forget Brahman disporting even when he's in the waking state. In fact, it's probably more important that he keeps aware of that in the waking state, because that's where Maya is allowed its sleight of hand. You have to be most careful there. And if you're not, then you take the waking state to be the only state, and the world to be the only reality. These are the dangers and the problems. The beauties of this system, however, are that Brahman is your very self in different phases. You have 7 mouths, I'm 14 mouths, and you have 7 ways in which you can experience this, and 3 states of consciousness means waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, because they're leaving the 4th is not a state at all. That's immersion. So beautifully put then is this system that takes waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, which is your calming experience every 24 hours. If, hopefully you're living that kind of a life of health and peace, health of body, peace of mind, and natural flow of prana, as the Upanishads say in their peace chants. If you're living that kind of life, then your 24 hours repeats these cycles all the time. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep, back out of dreaming, deep sleep into dreaming, back into waking, with variations. So it puts Brahman in you. It puts reality as your very experiences. And you just measure those by 3 different levels: gross, subtle, and causal. And it follows the Triputis of all the Triputis of India. Your in-breath, your held breath, your out-breath. Your birth, your life, your death. Your waking, your dreaming, your deep sleep. Your father, your mother, your guru. All the Triputis assigned to AUM of Om are all there as your own consciousness. And you should fully man those consciously. Consciousness has to be conscious of itself. Awareness has to be aware of itself. So there are probably more ways I could think of to explain the preciousness of that kind of way of thinking. And you could certainly see how Gaudapada wanted to bring it out for us. But if we take just in the time remaining, just the Jagrat state here, that means waking state, then here is how Brahman disports through that as Vishva, the individual. the state that Vishnu is in is enjoying. The locale which it finds itself in is the physical universe. The mechanism that it's having these experiences in is the body and senses. The condition that it's experiencing is cause and effect. The result of those experiences are pleasure and pain. And the view there, unfortunately, is a false perception of reality. So not a very good reading of A Perfect World by Gaudapada. This is what you're up against. Now, there are some so-called positives to it. Oh, good, I get to enjoy. I have pleasure. I get to use the body and senses. And those can all be allowed, probably not from the standpoint of a neti-neti kind of path, where you want to do not this, not this, not this, and cut it all away with the sword, as I was saying. But from the standpoint of Brahman disporting in the universe and becoming the 24 cosmic principles, as Sri Ramakrishna has said, if you looked at it that way, then the waking state becomes a place of opportunity. The opportunity we would think about as dharmic practitioners and those who teach the Dharma would probably be the standpoint of the opportunity being a chance to neutralize your karma. The children of Sri Ramakrishna and myself did not come here to the world to enjoy. We came here to discipline ourselves, because they all know how precious it is to get the boon of a human birth, because there are many wombs to be born in out there, even this physical planet. Souls, as it were. Do animals have souls? And insects have souls, plants have souls. Well, at some point probably those souls become just energy, prana, at a low state. But you can definitely look at the case of an animal and see how it has a soul there. And so it's received a birth in an animal form, which is not without risks for sure. But the human form, they say, is the most divine gift here. And so you use this birth to, as Sri Ramakrishna has again said, to reach the goal of human existence. There's really no other purpose for that. And so your hot air balloon has to be weightless. Sandbags have to be thrown out, cut. And so your mind can be buoyant. Its thoughts can be buoyant. Its intelligence can be honed. And you can be in a state of yogic insomnia. The soul never sleeps. Brahman never sleeps, so why should the soul sleep? It's in an ever-awake state. Because it's been nurtured on this most precious of all teachings that keeps it awake all the time. The prana is purified, so that won't let it sleep. The thoughts are of aspiration, so that won't let it sleep. This beautiful phantom of the Divine Mother is running through everything. She won't let you sleep. So her beauty is all attracting. The mantra won't let you sleep. Your guru won't let you sleep. The rishis, in all their illumination, will not let you sleep. You're in an ever-awake state all the time, even when you're sleeping. Well, what does sleeping mean? If we have the time for it here, let's look at the dreaming state. And this is a chart for a whole 3-hour class or for a 2 or 3 day retreat. We've actually used it for that before. But hang on to your hats or your dhotis or your chuddars or whatever you're wearing here as we move on rather quickly into swapna. Remember, this is how Brahman's disporting at the 3 levels of consciousness. So it's not like Brahman's some far-off thing that you'll never meet, has nothing to do with you, is only transcendent, and has nothing to do with form. It may have something to do with form because all the form comes out of it. That's what I started off chanting today. That formless, nameless reality out of which the Trinity sprang. So somehow Brahman has in it Maya, Shakti, Trinity, the Word. Isn't the Word one with God too? So how could it not have any connection with everything? It is the connection. It's the lightning bolt that's making everything shine, even on down to the shutters. The light might not appear in the shutters. It doesn't mean it didn't feel the thunder and maybe want to wake up. So I'm using some metaphors and analogies here to give this topic some deeper credence, if you will. But this is pretty much an ingenious system that doesn't need any proving. It's just obvious when you see it. So if you shift to the dreaming state, which you do every night for some part of that 8 hours in which you sleep, unless you sleep longer, shame on you. But so because 1 or 2 hours of sleep, if you're really a yogi, is enough. Some of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna live their whole life sleeping, even when they're older, just a few hours. So if you're getting 4 to 6 hours, you're fortunate to receive that respite and that rest, but you should be able to go on and on if the condition rises for it. So swapna, we started out saying the waking state had the individual Vishtva in it, but the dream state has the individual called Taijasa. The state is dream. He is the dreamer. The locale is the mental realm, whereas before he was in the physical universe. That's very important to contrast that against this. You've shifted states of consciousness. How does that work as far as the locale? You were in the physical universe, now you're in your mind. And the physical universe, as we saw in this chart, has come out of the mind via these various mechanisms. Antakarana, and manifested prakriti, and ancestors, and so forth. So put this all together. Then finally, the mechanism there is the mind you're using, not the body and senses. However, you do have subtle senses in dream, don't you? You see, taste, touch, hear, and smell in a dream. Some of your dreams are about eating, some of them are about flying, and some of them are about warming yourself in fire or being burned in fire if it's a nightmare. The condition there has not changed. That's one of the telling things between the waking and the dreaming state. They're both cause and effect are both there. And it's only in deep sleep where you see that change, because then in deep sleep you see that the subtle cause is there. But cause and effect are basically both occupying your waking and dreaming state. Whereas the result on earth was pleasure and pain, the result in the dream is deception. Because when you're dreaming, you think the dream is real. And actually that follows you back here. You think this dream is real too. So both the waking and the dreaming, you're taking them to be real. But the distinction is when you're on earth, awake, you don't think the dream was real. See? And you don't think this dream was real either. But when you get into the dream state, you think that dream's real, and the earth disappears for you. So the two mirror each other, Gaudapada says. So when neither of them can be fully trusted, and you can see why he puts it in that way. Deception and pleasure and pain cannot lead you to enlightenment. They tend to veil enlightenment. The view, and we'll have to pick this up next week and finish up this. I hope this is like a serial, you know, in the old 50s and 60s, black and white serials where the woman's just about to get sawed by the log, or by the saw. They stop it right there. Tune in to next week, you know, to see the results, see if she gets cut in half, and what that looks like. But basically, this is my serial to you this day. Is that we will pick this up next week, right at finishing up Swapna into Sushupti. But to finish up Swapna, the view there is skewed. It was all false back on earth. You took the earth to be real. God was not a part of the package. You didn't see Brahman disporting. It's really not that much different in Swapna, because who sees God in a dream? Very few. Their ego is dreaming. They're tajas. You see, they're the dreamer. The dream is for them. And it's going to take a lot for some higher power to intersect itself into your dream and say, wake up. See? See, grab you by your dream shoulders. Wake up, wake up. That's called divine intervention of a spiritual kind. So skewed perception of reality is one of the downsides of dream. Oh, dreamer, awake, you must, is how they say that in a song in India. We'll see how that happens into deep sleep and all the way to transcendence when we get together for the continuing episode of the 4 states of consciousness and how Brahman disports through all of them. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya Abira Mayedi Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Denamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from the unreal to the real. And lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.